More than 300 Taliban fighters have been killed in battles with Afghan security forces over the past 24 hours. The Afghan Ministry of Defence says many of the casualties resulted from airstrikes. The fighting coincides with the departure of the last remaining American and NATO troops from Bagram Air Base outside the capital, Kabul. Despite reports from the battlefield this weekend, many Afghans fear the military will struggle to repel a resurgent Taliban without US support.
This is the sound of US troops leaving Afghanistan to its fate. In 2001, after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, US troops turned Баграм into a key military base to hunt down militant groups responsible for the atrocity. Now, the Afghan government is getting control back, even though talks between them and Taliban militants have made no headway. President Biden believes it can work.
Look, we're in that war for 20 years, 20 years. And I think I met with the Afghan government here in the White House, in the Oval. I think they have the capacity to be able to sustain the government.
Afghans do not have as much faith in their government as Biden. As military troops depart, they too are looking for a way out. People are flocking to passport offices in Kabul to plan their exit. We are very worried about a possible return of the Taliban, so we want to leave the country before the situation gets worse. Most districts have fallen. There's not a single district without fighting. They've even reached the chief of police's office and provincial capitals. I've come here to get my passport and get out of Afghanistan. It's not safe here. For the soldiers of the Afghan National and Defense Forces, that's not an option. Some feel the country is finally their own, and they intend to hold it, keeping the Taliban at bay. This land belongs to you and us. The Russians were here and they left. Then the Americans came and now they have left. This country is ours, and we will protect it even without pay or equipment. Meanwhile, the Taliban are gaining ever more ground in Afghanistan. Over the past weeks, they've been on the offensive, releasing propaganda videos and taking control of many districts. It won't be until the last US troops pull out on September 11th that the world will finally learn what the Taliban have planned.
Let's get more from Afghanistan with Mariam Safi. She's the founding director of the Organisation for Policy, Research and Development Studies, a pro-democracy think tank in Kabul. Mariam, thanks for joining us. With these foreign forces pulling out, can we expect the Taliban to retake Afghanistan, including the capital, Kabul?
Well, that's a question that's actually on everybody's mind right now. We have lost about a quarter of Afghanistan's districts to the Taliban since approximately end of April and May, when the announcement of the withdrawal had taken place. Now that's by the 29th of June alone, we had about 127 districts that had fallen to the Taliban, and 10 had been retaken by the Afghan National Security Forces. At this rate, it certainly seems that the Taliban have left the peace talks and the negotiation table and have resorted to a military takeover of districts approaching the outskirts of Kabul, which they had been in the past, but far more aggressively now. The potential for a military takeover of the Taliban of the entire country is something that both Afghan officials, Afghan people, members of the international community are now concerned with.
Is there a way to get those peace talks with the Kabul government and the rebels back on track?
There are efforts underway. The Afghan negotiating team is in Doha right now as we speak, and they are there to start talks with the Taliban. Reports come out that the Taliban are not willing to sit on the negotiation table at the present moment.
What about the gains that have been made by Afghan women in the last decades? Are we going to see a rollback of that? Is that an area of concern in Afghanistan?
There are already reports emerging of districts in certain provinces like Tahar. Very recently, we have reports that districts that have been taken over by the Taliban, they have already imposed restrictions on women, on media. For instance, women are in Tahar reportedly not allowed to leave the house without a male chaperone. Clinics have been closed. There's also reports of media blackout in certain districts that the Taliban have taken over. So there's no coverage of the atrocities that are taking place in those areas. And men are told to now keep a beard. And certain of these are reflective of what we saw in the 90s when the Taliban were in power. And so we are seeing that happen. There are reports that are emerging of that scenario, and that is indicative of a very horrifying scenario where we are very much of the belief that there is going to be a rollback in many gains, and particularly women's rights, if this continues at this rate.
Now, Mariam, we're running out of time, but as we just heard in that report, we're seeing a lot of people leave Afghanistan. Do you expect that to continue?
Yes, there are lineups all across the Afghan passport office here in Kabul, where we are. There are lineups behind embassies. Afghans are they're dreading what the future would hold for the country. They're uncertain, and the uncertainty is what is provoking Afghans to leave the country at this present time, in addition to the collective memory of what had happened in the 90s.
All right, Mariam Safi, founding director of the Organisation for Policy Research and Development Studies in Kabul, thank you very much for your time.